God created sex between a couple to bond us together and to create very, very powerful feelings of attachment and commitment and so on and so forth. This is why the devil will do anything he can to sabotage your sex life. And so as couples, we need to understand this is a covenant. This is not a cheap and easy animal relationship where sex is just like it is in the world. This is a powerful spiritual relationship. Our society has completely decontextualized sex and marriage. And this was the devil's plan. God created sex for marriage. Now, marriage is a covenant. And the word covenant means to cut. You don't make a covenant, you cut a covenant. God could have made Eve out of the dust of the ground just the way he made Adam. But God cut Adam and took a rib out for covenant. And, men were made out of dirt, women were made out of man's rib. From the very beginning, women were more expensive and more complicated. And so covenant means to cut. And so there has to be blood for there to be a covenant. Jesus said, this is the new covenant in my blood. Now I can't say this kind of a thing in church, but I'll say it in a marriage conference. And that is the first time a woman has sex, her hymen stretches and tears and she bleeds. And there is no scientists are baffled at the existence of a woman's hymen because it has no practical application. God didn't make it for a practical application. He made it to create covenant. And there are still societies around the world that on the wedding night, a woman has to produce a cloth with blood on it, proving that she's a virgin. And it was true during Jesus' time. And so sex creates covenant. Sex is the covenant seal of the marriage covenant, and it's the covenant sign. All covenants have a seal and sign. The covenant seal of the new covenant is water baptism. It seals the deal. The seal means it seals the deal, okay? So you consummate, you get married, and then you consummate your marriage. You seal the deal by having sex. Well, there's also a covenant sign. And the covenant sign says, hey, I'm walking in good faith. I remember the covenant that we have. The covenant sign of the new covenant is communion. Jesus said, as often as you do this, remember me. And so we take communion to remember the covenant that we're in with Jesus. And there's a blessing. Every time we take communion, there is a huge blessing that God pours out on us through that communion. Okay? Sex, we don't just have sex with each other to have pleasure. We have sex with each other also to say, I remember. I remember that I stood at the altar with you and I vowed before God and all the witnesses to love and to cherish you as long as we both live. And so I'm not just having the sex with you for pleasure, I'm having it as a sign. And when we have sex, there are tremendous benefits every time we have sex. Research has proven every single time a couple have sex, there are hundreds of very powerful hormones and chemicals that pour into our bodies that are very powerful. One is called prolactin. Prolactin causes relaxation, reduced stress, and sleepiness. Now, this is the reason men fall asleep. There's a medical reason, ladies. He can't help it. All the guys, I just did you a big favor there, and I hope you remember that. Research proves that prolactin decreases fear and anxiety. Vasopressin is another important hormone in long-term commitment stage and is released after sex. It causes us to bond together and have feelings of commitment and goodwill. Tara Parker Pope wrote a book called For Better, The Science of a Good Marriage. And they have found in science that vasopressin is a hormone that causes two brains to connect. And it actually causes you to find members of the opposite sex less attractive. Now in research, they did research on this, and before sex, they showed people pictures of the opposite sex, and they found them attractive. After sex, they showed them pictures, they didn't find them attractive because of vasopressin. Oxytocin is the cuddle hormone. It's a powerful hormone released by men and women during orgasm. It deepens feelings of trust and attachment. It makes couples feel much closer to one another after they have had sex. And by the way, when a baby is born, oxytocin is released in the mother and child that causes them to bond. This is the bonding hormone, okay? Dopamine, obviously, that's the pleasure hormone. And so it's released also when we have sex. And so what research has proved is God created sex between a couple to bond us together and to create very, very powerful feelings of attachment and commitment and so on and so forth. This is why the devil will do anything he can to, sabotage your sex life. And so as couples, we need to understand this is a covenant. This is not a cheap and easy animal relationship where sex is just like it is in the world. This is a powerful spiritual relationship. And sex is what consummated our relationship. And sex is also something that every time we do it is an act of goodwill, is a sign of the covenant. It releases powerful blessings into our marriage. So it's very, very important. So I want to talk about, this message is called Getting Real About Sex and Marriage. I want to first of all talk about inhibitions, some real inhibitions and misconceptions about God. So Genesis 2:25 has a very powerful statement, and it says, God, man and his wife, Adam and Eve, were naked without shame. Okay, now they weren't just physically naked; they were mentally, emotionally naked. Arome is the word there for naked, and it means exposed. So before the fall, Adam and Eve were able to completely expose themselves for each other. And by the way, I don't believe that their nakedness was pornographic. I believe they had the glory of God on their bodies. Before they fell, I believe that there was a glory on their bodies that caused it not to be pornographic. But after they fell, okay, so God walks up, and this shows you now how the devil attacks sexuality, human sexuality, first and foremost. So after Adam and Eve fell, God walks up, and Adam is hiding from God. And Adam says, what is this that you've done? And Adam said, I'm afraid because I'm naked. Remember, they were naked and unafraid. Now they're naked and afraid. And God says this to Adam, who told you you were naked? Well, God never asked a question to get an answer. The devil slithered up in the form of a serpent because he's stealthy. This is what makes him so dangerous. It would be very easy to deal with the devil if he just knocked on the front door. You open the front door, he's there, red suit, pitchfork, bifurcated tail, horns. I'm Satan H. Devil, I'd like to come in and just destroy your life. No. That'd be easy. That's not what he does. He slithers in, you don't know he's there, and he begins to whisper thoughts into your mind. And so here's what happened. So Adam and Eve's sin opened a door to the devil, and he slithered in and said to them, you're sexually defective, and there's something wrong with your sexuality. And they began to hide themselves from God and each other. The first thing that God ever attacked, or the devil ever attacked, was human sexuality. And he wants to bring shame and fear. See, anytime the devil wants to control something, he brings shame and fear into our lives so he can control that thing. God doesn't use shame. And God created marriage beautiful he created sex beautiful without any shame whatsoever. So let me talk. Just a minute. When God created sex and marriage, he said it was very good, and God has never changed his mind. God is not grossed out. God watches you have sex. You know that, don't you? He doesn't leave the room. And he can see in the dark and through flannel nightgowns. So, let me talk about the 7 purposes of sex here for just a minute. Because there are many different purposes for sex. Number 1 is reproduction. Let me say something just a minute. One of the horrific things that is happening in America today is the decline in the birth rate. So anytime that marriage is threatened in any society, Rome, Egypt, Samaria, all of the great societies that fell from within, anytime that marriage begins to decline, the birth rate declines. Let me just say it's real easy math. If there are no children, there is no future. And the first thing that God said to Adam and Eve was, be fruitful and multiply. I want to say something to believing couples. You need to have children. Now, if you can't have children, I understand that. But this is a divine assignment by God. I'm not saying you have to have 7 or 10, but I'm just saying kids are not a burden. Kids are a blessing, and they're the future. And so more and more couples are choosing not to have children or, to have fewer children. And they talk about climate change. Oh, we don't want to bring children in this world. Well, by the way, I'm kind of the end times guy too. So I do end times teaching and stuff like that. They're going to tell you, it's going to be okay. Jesus is coming. He really is. You can bring kids into this world. You really can. Yeah. Almost a third of the Bible is Bible prophecy. Most of it has to do with the times that we're living in. We of all people know the future, and we do not have to be afraid. And so reproduction is a big reason why we have sex. Not every time, obviously, or you'd have a whole bunch of kids. But anyway. Okay. Number 2 is comfort. You comfort each other. The hormones and the chemicals are powerful. It's very, very comforting. If you're dealing with anxiety, you need to have more sex. Sensual, number 3, sensual enjoyment and pleasure. Without sex and fun, marriage is a business relationship. You need to be having sex and having fun. Sensual enjoyment. Number 4, self-esteem and confidence. If you don't initiate sex with your spouse, it will affect their self-esteem. And part of pursuing your spouse is letting them know that you're attracted to them. But if you never initiate sex, it will communicate to them that you're not attracted to them, and it will affect their self-esteem. And I say this sometimes, and I mean this. I take personal responsibility for Karen Evans' self-esteem. If she has any self-esteem issues, it's not because of me, because I think she's the most gorgeous person in the world. And so we need to communicate to our spouse that we're attracted to them, and sex is how we do that, part of how we do that. Number 5 is bonding. It brings closeness. It bonds us together. You saw what the chemicals do. They actually cause us mentally and emotionally and physically to bond with each other. Number 6 is intimate knowledge. The Bible says that Adam knew Eve and they had a son. There's something that you know about a person that you've had sex with that you don't know about anybody else. There's an intimate knowledge that comes from it that's very important. Number 7 is protection from outside temptation, is vasopressin. And by the way, this is a very important scripture, 1 Corinthians 7:5. So the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 7:5 says this: when you get married, you don't have authority over your own body anymore, but your spouse does, so that you can get your sexual needs met. When I talk about the law of partnership, which is the 3rd law in my book, the 4 Laws of Love, when you get married, the law of partnership is so profound. They two shall become one flesh, is that you lose the right over your own body sexually. Now, this is not a right for abuse. It's not a license for abuse. You can't abuse your spouse, but it's giving your spouse conjugal rights. See, when you get married, you swear fidelity. I can't shop in any other stores. I can't meet my own needs. If I could meet my own needs, I wouldn't get married. And so I have sworn fidelity to your store. And if there's a close sign on it for a long time, I'm sunk. And so I've just got to know, if I'm going to swear fidelity to your store for the rest of my life, that there's not a lock on the door, that I can push that door open when I need to. Not in an aggressive way, not in an appropriate way, but we share ownership of each other's body. Another way to say it is this is your body. It's here for your pleasure, and I want to serve you. The secret of sexual fulfillment is a servant spirit. When two servants get into bed to have sex, they come out happy because they serve each other. But if you're selfish, you're not going to be sexually fulfilled.